I think it's interesting, like when you're going through just from an overview of these prospects, I tried to put together a little bit of an introduction. And some of them, it's not difficult, even though I know like Matt Waldman's not super high on AD Mitchell. I don't think you are either. But when you just look at it from like the 10,000 foot range, this does sound like a guy that NFL teams usually get really excited about. 6'2", 205 pounds, runs a 4.3 40, still just 21 years old. He played high-level college football. Great deep wide receiver. I'm wondering, can he do anything else?
Yeah, I really have a tough time with Mitchell. He at least did like score 11 touchdowns last year, so that gives him something in his production profile. But outside of that, there's almost nothing. He didn't average more than 2 yards per route run in a single season, and it's really hard to find any players who have been drafted who didn't at least top 2 yards per route run in one season. Like even Jonathan Mingo did it, and Mingo had one of the worst statistical profiles I've ever seen. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how the NFL evaluates Mitchell, because obviously he's a freaky dude in terms of what he can do with his, 11.4 broad jump, 4.3, 4.40. Like it's just nuts for someone at his size. But there are actually kind of guys like that. There's no one that's quite as freaky as him. But we're going to talk about Xavier Legette, somebody I really, really like. And there's guys like that who have actually shown us some semblance of being a productive receiver, which we've never seen from Mitchell. Now, again, contextualize it with the fact that the quarterback play at Texas was not good, especially for downfield weapons like Mitchell. His off-target rate wasn't as high as Worthy's, but it was high. I also think it's interesting that AD Mitchell graded out better than Worthy did, according to PFF's receiving grade in 2023. So take that for what it's worth. I have a tough time with his prospect profile, and I'm really going to wait and see where he gets drafted. And then if it's a spot where he could be fantasy relevant, I'm going to really just try to dig in and see if I can find anything that's comparable to him. Like Terry McLaurin comes to mind as somebody who really did not perform well in college, but then became a stud at the NFL level. But even McLaurin had a better profile than this.
Yeah, and so I look at this, and I mentioned on Tuesday's show, and I'll mention it again now, like the order we're going through, we're trying to highlight the guys that, and according to pre-draft ADP, people seem to be the most interested in drafting. Mm-hmm. And Mitchell is currently wide receiver 7, according to pre-draft ADP. If you were doing a rookie draft before the draft, like, is that too high, too low, just right? And we'll do that with each of the prospects. And then what concerns you if it's too high with him being that high?
Yeah, it's way too high for me. It reminds me of Mingo, where you're truly just taking a shot on upside, except that the opportunity cost is way different than it was last year. This year's rookie class is much, much better. I have a tough time, even if he gets an ideal landing spot, I have a tough time considering him a first-round Dynasty pick.
And really, if you're looking at a super flex league, for the most part, 7, I think, wide receivers is what we're seeing go in the first round right now, because it's 4 QBs, it's Brock Bowers, and it's 7 wide receivers. I think most likely once we get through the NFL draft, it's going to be 5 wide receivers, because there are a couple running backs that go day 2 and get good landing spots, aka whoever the Cowboys and the Chargers take on day 2. And those guys end up in round 1, but he's still an early round 2 pick. So like it does sound like we're a little bit negative on him, but I do think, I think he's one of the most polarizing players who could go in round 1 of rookie drafts. And the reason for that is there is a lot of reason to believe in upside here, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Just athletically, like I said, he's really kind of like unlike anything we've seen. So there's definitely upside. But that's you're truly just kind of taking a shot in the dark on upside. And I feel like there's just so many other guys that I'm intrigued by in this draft that I would rather have.
Garrett says in the chat, put them on the Bills and tell me what you think. And that's going to be the answer for all of these wide receivers who might go at the end of round 1, unless we get the Bills trading up for one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers. What do you think? And we'll finish up with him here. What do you think is the best case scenario for Mitchell? If everything goes right in his NFL career, how does it look for Adonai Mitchell?
Yeah, I think the Bills would be a great fit. But yeah, it's clearly as a field stretcher. His average route depth has been 10 or more yards every season of his career, and that is really, really high. That means the average distance from the line of scrimmage that his initial cut and his route came was 10 yards or higher. So he's basically just running deep routes. And I think he could fill that role at a high level. He clearly has the explosiveness to beat guys down the field. But again, for fantasy, it's a pretty hit or miss role.
Well, I think the name that comes to mind when you talk about that type of profile and needing to be great at it is what we've seen from George Pickens the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Like, do you actually believe that he has as much upside as Pickens?
No, I think Pickens is a much better receiver from what I've seen.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Maybe a poor man's George Pickens, which is not great for fantasy football.